Hey guys, here in the studio, and I'm about to show you guys how to make some cool synth sounds. Basically it requires you to have any synth that has a few oscillators, which nowadays, even if it's digital VST kind of synth, then you have this option. Okay, massive, serum, blah blah blah. So let's just look at the Moog today. And what kind of waveform we got there? It's a sawtooth wave. You got it dialed in right there. And it sounds fat because it's a Moog. However, you could get something like that in the digital domain. Now, the next step would be, and this is something a lot of you might do already, but you need a second oscillator. And I'm going to turn it up. And let's listen to that. Turn it up a second here. So what happens is it starts to sound a bit flangey, and that's because the waveforms are almost perfectly in sync, but with analog you get what's called a drift. And the drift is when the oscillator slightly goes out of tune and starts to have a beating effect. And beating is just when two oscillators slowly drift in and out of phase from each other, and the reason they do that is because of the pitch changing ever so slightly. So notice here there's a big old frequency knob on oscillator 2. See oscillator 2? And you can detune it by, let's say it's at 0, so it's perfectly in tune, perfectly playing the note I'm pressing. And let's try and make this waveform perfectly a saw wave, which on here is 110. I'll do it on both of them. Okay, they're both saying 110. And so that's about as closely in tune as we can get it. But to make a fatter sound, I'm going to do the opposite. So I spent time doing that, but I'm going to slightly detune one a little bit. Okay, so that's in cents. There's 100 cents in a semitone. And a semitone is from, say, C to C sharp. So it's this very fine tune, like a guitar tune. And then third oscillator here. Let's try this out. And same thing, make sure it's a saw wave. That has to read 110. And let's put these all at the same octave right now. And slightly going to go the opposite direction. So remember, this is about +4. This one we're going to go about -4. So there we have a fatter sound. Now imagine that I go one step further and I detune, sorry, not detune, but I actually change the waveform ever so slightly in opposite directions here. Okay, so instead of it reading 110, 105, and this one's about 115. Just and you got to put reverb on this thing, maybe a little release time. A little glide because we like glide. So there you go, it's kind of a fatter sound. There's other things we can do. I'm going to go one final step further. This would be harder to do in massive, but you can do it in serum. And in serum they call it panning the filters. If you go in the filter section, you'll see something called panning. And it doesn't mean you're panning just the signal left or right. It means you actually, in a single filter in serum, you have two built-in filters. One will be slightly off the frequency your cutoff knob is at. Okay, and the other one will be slightly off to the other side, just like we did over here. One slightly to the right, one slightly to the left. Imagine instead of, you have one cutoff knob, but you're actually hearing two filters. Okay, so see, that's why this says dual low pass. The Moog labels it for you. But they call it spacing. Okay, spacing is when the cutoff frequency is here, but you're actually hearing two filters, one slightly to the left, one slightly spaced to the right. And the more spacing you do, the more dramatic it sounds. And what ends up happening is you get a nice width on your filter. This is such a lovely sound. You're not going to hear it too well out here, but it actually, in a stereo kind of field, you're going to hear it on headphones. It's going to be extremely dramatic, and it's a great way to get synth sounding wide. This is why, by the way, we use something called Unison a lot. Unison is when your oscillators are slightly detuned. That's technically a unison. A lot of people using that kind of sound. This is filter unison, I would call it. I don't hear it called that much, but it's the same idea where something's slightly off on one side and slightly unique on the other side. And when they're mixed together, it just sounds great. Let's see if we can hear it. I'll try and go a little extreme. Actually, you're not going to hear it because I think this mic here is mono, so there's no chance. But take my word for it, it makes it really wide. It's a good way to stack a synth. Final thing is using a sub-oscillator. Okay, if I flip one of these down an octave, say oscillator 1, then we're going to get a lot more fatness in the low end. Maybe I'll make this a triangle wave. It's the closest the Moog has to a sine wave. It only has a few harmonics, this triangle wave particularly. I know harmonics for triangles are every other odd numbered harmonic. However, this one's really mellow until you start dialing in some saw waves. So let's try that. Okay, so you get this nice low end fatness. Another thing, just for fun, because we're trying to make cool sounds, is what if we tune one of these down quite a lot in terms of like semitones? We could try something like this. I need another hand here. There we go. And then maybe try this one up here. It's basically a funky minor chord. And so, using oscillators with different tunings is a great way to get that fatness. So anyways, that's one kind of knowledge-based thing you could use in any synth that you have access to, is slightly detuning oscillators, playing with dual filters, doing some sub-oscillation and stuff like that. Hopefully that helps you guys on your ventures here. All right, cheers.